Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Drill, and it is our final quarterback episode. We're talking about the Big 12 today. We are very excited to get started. But before we get into anything, that's Jack Donovan. I'm Michael Rochman. Jack, how are you today?
Doing good, nothing too crazy going on for me. Just working on these quarterbacks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the weekend. I'm having a good time. And again, grinding out the tape. We got quarterbacks today. Then next week, we're going to be starting on running backs and wide receivers. So just grinding the tape, trying to get a feel for all the top prospects around college football. And very excited as we get closer and closer to the season. So we're going to start with the passers of the Big 12 right now. And that's going to start with how we've always done it. We're going alphabetical order by school. So Arizona is starting us off with Noah Fifita, the 5'10", 194, third-year sophomore, 2 years of eligibility after the season. Jack, why don't you get us started on your thoughts on his play?
Yeah, Trevor Sikkema said something I thought was really funny. He said that he's gonna be Bryce Young's biggest fan this year, and I think that's gonna be a big kind of indicator of his stock, whether right or wrong. Because, like you mentioned, the frame is real small. So we're gonna need to see Bryce have a good year if we're gonna be able to take Fifita seriously as an early round prospect, I think. But I mean, that aside, I really liked what he put on tape last year. I think the arm's nice. He can zip it, especially in the short and intermediate game. He's a good athlete. He can run around a bit. He can create for himself. You don't want him to run too much given the size, but I think he can when he needs to. And I think he's in for another big year with Tedero McMillan back. And even though he's losing Jake Cowing, I think there's enough around him still that he'll be able to have another nice season. So I think it's really seeing if he can bulk up a little bit, and then that's really it. I think the size is the big detractor for me. I really liked his tape. I'm just not there with the size. I think the league might struggle with that, especially if Bryce Young has another tough season in Carolina.
Yeah, I'm similar boat with you. I thought the size, it's not always an issue for me if someone's small, but whenever the issues can kind of be seen on tape is when I start to write it down and maybe add more to it. And I think for Fafita, he had some issues when it came to kind of sticking around in the pocket, trying to hang around some of the bigger bodies that are in the trenches of both the offense and defensive side of the football. And that's where the concerns kind of raise up. He's obviously a great athlete. He's got some nice arm talent. He can make some great plays with his legs, whether it's extending the play as a passer or scrambling to pick up yards with his feet. So I'm intrigued in that regard. And again, McMillan is going to be an absolute stud that makes his job 10 times easier. But yeah, I mean, there's questions about how can you stick around in the pocket? How are you going to adapt to the NFL size of the game? And I think that part of his skill set is still left to be seen. Again, this was a situation where he kind of was thrust into the quarterback job later on in the year, not like super late in the season, but it came a little bit later than the opening day. So I think part of that will come with just more experience as he gets more acclimated as the guy and he gets an offseason as the known starting quarterback. But he's entering a new offensive system with Jedd Fisch heading to Washington. So that's going to be interesting to keep a track on. But overall, I'm excited for Fifita. I think he's a great college quarterback. We're in for a huge year for him. But now it's just the question mark of how is he going to project as an NFL prospect that I think is still a little bit on the fence for me.
Yeah, I'm a similar role. I'm excited to see how they do. Fish is a big loss. I'm a big fan of him as an offensive mind, but I like Brett Brennan, who they brought in from San Jose State. So I think he'll still be able to produce. I think there's enough around him as far as supporting casts go that I'm not too worried about the losses they had this offseason.
Yeah, with 2 years of eligibility left, I think I'm expecting him to return right now, even though I do think there's enough hype that with a good season, he would be an NFL prospect for sure. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if he sticks around. And I mean, maybe with the way college football's kind of gone, he could be a guy that is looked at as a transfer portal option where maybe Arizona can't hold on to him if a team like Georgia comes calling or something like that. So we're going to see how it plays out for everyone. But this is going to be
Yeah,
an intriguing guy that whether he's
I
in the
think
NFL, whether he sticks around in college, he's going to be super exciting.
yeah, I think especially because McMillan probably declares after this year that the transfer option becomes a lot more possible, without having that guy to latch onto, not latch onto, but be paired with it, like for another year.
Yeah, so moving forward, we're going to talk about Baylor quarterback, transfer from Toledo, Dequan Finn, 6 year senior. So he has no more eligibility left. 6'2", 205 pounds. Definitely an intriguing guy that has been talked about as a potential prospect for a bit now, but we haven't seen a lot of Toledo tape out there. For as little as you may have been able to watch, what were your thoughts on him, Jack?
Yeah, I was intrigued. I thought, the athleticism was very clearly there. He can do a lot with his legs. I think the arm's pretty good. I think he's able to create for himself both as a passer and a runner. He's improved against pressure over the years. I think that's kind of a good development to see. I do think he does try to do a little bit too much at times, especially under pressure. I think he's another guy who kind of bails out of the pocket a little bit early. I wish he'd kind of stay in the pocket and really deliver on a more consistent basis, especially because his arm's pretty good. Like he's able to do it. I think he just gets a little panicky at times. And I also think that the touch isn't quite there yet. I think he kind of is kind of all fastball a little bit with his throwing. But I'm intrigued by the tools. I think there's an NFL quarterback there. I don't know, you know, if he's a year away or 2 years away. With only 1 year left, though, as far as prospect wise, I think there's going to need to be a leap. And with the increase in competition this year, going from the MAC to the Big 12, we're really going to need to see a leap. So I'll be interested to see how he does. Baylor's roster is a little bit rough, so I think he's gonna have to put a lot of the load on his shoulders this year. So I'm very intrigued, but I think it's maybe not the best possible situation for him to really thrive.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat with you when it came to his evaluation. I thought that he has some really nice tools, and I'm intrigued in that regard. I think I would want him to be a little bit bigger for the type of prototype that he is. 6'2", 205 isn't necessarily the greatest size, especially when schools are tending to kind of bump those numbers up. So we could easily see him kind of come in 6'1", 203, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he bulks up and how he tries to kind of fix those issues as a drop back passer, staying in the pocket, kind of making more throws that are in structure. He has the athleticism, he has the tools, and I think especially at the G5 level, he was a better athlete than most guys on the field. So it's a lot easier for him to kind of just create for himself. But at the Big 12, not necessarily the highest level of competition for each team that he's going to be going against, but I think it's a situation where he's going to have to make a lot more plays that are within the confines of the playbook. And I'm excited to see that. And I'm intrigued by the idea that Baylor knew that their season is going to be determining kind of their job security, and they decided to roll with Finn, a very exciting prospect. But I'm not 100% sold on him. I think there's definitely still some questions when it comes to processing and just making those reads is still going to be an issue. Accuracy definitely improved. It took a nice step forward this season, but there's still more work to be done that I think is still left on the table for Finn in order to really kind of buy into him as a prospect.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit raw for what you'd want to see from a 6-year senior, but I think he has enough tools where he's someone at least worth paying attention to as the season progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward to Jake Retzlaff, the quarterback out of BYU, 6'1", 205 pounds. I was trying to figure out his eligibility and classification and all that, and I'm not 100% certain because he came from Riverside City College, a lower level league. I'm not sure which one it was. I was Googling and trying to figure that out as well, and I couldn't really pin it down, but eventually transferred up to BYU last season, showed some nice promise in his limited starts, but overall, I'm not seeing a ton of potential as an NFL quarterback. I think there's definitely some issues in terms of just throwing motions very slow. The overall velocity is kind of like middling more so than anything. And I think the ball sputters a lot out of his throwing motion, which is a big issue. And it takes a lot off of his passes. Some decent tools, some decent athleticism. I understand why BYU is definitely intrigued by the guy, but I think I would have liked to see more. Jerry Bohannon is going to be coming in, or Gary Bohannon, sorry, is going to be coming in, and he's the kind of experienced vet that's going to be competing for the job. So not necessarily going to be Retzlaff's opportunity all season if he struggles, but right now he's a projected starter, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure actually because I was curious when I was looking through. I'm pretty sure it's still open the starting job. But I also watched Retzlaff. I agree with the release. I'm glad you mentioned that. I thought that definitely needs to be tightened a bit. He's a little slow to get the ball out. I also, wasn't really quite there with the arm. I thought it was okay. There's some nice throws, but it's another guy who can kind of do a little bit in the short and intermediate game, but doesn't really have the ability to threaten downfield on a consistent basis. Which is tough to get excited about when you're talking about an NFL prospect. I thought he had 1 year left after this year, but I don't really know what I was basing that off of, so I could be totally wrong. Just talking about eligibility. I like the athleticism. I think there's some stuff to be interested in, and he's not really experienced at a Power 5 level yet. So, maybe he takes a step with, an off season to kind of acclimate with reps with the starters. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite there. I'm hoping he's another year left because I think maybe another year of development would be good for him to kind of continue to tighten up the mechanics and get more comfortable playing against solo competition.
Yeah, Slovitz was obviously the starter last season. Injuries kind of brought Retzlaff into the situation where he is now. So it'll be intriguing to see how he is with an offseason of work as competing for the starting job, but also, potentially returning for another year. Not necessarily that he's guaranteed to keep the position, but it's certainly something that the ideal situation is he's there for a season, gets another year under his belt after that. So it could be an intriguing projection, but right now, I think as an NFL prospect, I'm not seeing it. Moving forward to UCF, Central Florida, KJ Jefferson coming in from Arkansas, an interesting acquisition because this is someone that a lot of people were kind of viewing as a potential NFL draft prospect. Didn't necessarily have the year that he wanted, especially with the Razorbacks in full. Just didn't win as many games as they were hoping for. Now he is with the Golden Knights. Raheem Sanders is over at South Carolina. What were your thoughts on Jefferson?
Yeah, he's had some hype for a couple of years. I've never been, his biggest fan. I think there was always a lot of work he needed to do as a passer. Um, I thought, he's not a bad quarterback. I think, there's some NFL upside there because, he's huge. He's like an absolute tank. Some of the sacks he can avoid with just how big he is and how strong he is are really impressive. And he can do a little bit as a runner too. The arm is decent. The accuracy is decent. Last year was a little bit rough for a lot of reasons. I'm just not super bought in for him to take this big step to really be a good passer at an NFL standard. He also took a ton of sacks last year, which, was not the norm for him earlier in his career. So I'm not like writing him off or it's like not like a non-starter for me, but it's definitely something I'm a little bit concerned about. But Arkansas had some struggles last year. So, there could be other things at play. I I'm I'm expecting him to be kind of like a late round type of guy, UDFA type of guy. But for me, I'm just not there with his ability as a passer. And I don't think he brings quite enough as a runner for me to be like, this can be, a dual threat backup type of mold, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't. At 6'3", 247, there's always going to be intrigue about a guy that size, and he does a great job of taking contact and shaking off defenders to where he's able to break those tackle attempts and maybe scramble for a few additional yards or keep some extra time in the pocket. But the big issue for me with him is that his spin is so inconsistent on his passes to where the ball is just consistently on a down trajectory when he's delivering downfield. And there's so many issues with that where you're kind of resulting in a lot of accuracy issues. And it's more so at when he's throwing towards the sticks. It's not necessarily like downfield. He kind of is more natural with putting out a nice pass. In the short game, he can kind of zip in, make some nice throws. But it's that middle game where he just consistently has issues where he's throwing almost at a way where he's aiming it at the dirt. And there's passes where it's just so off the mark that your receivers are battling back to the football, killing all yards after the catch opportunities. And it just limits the offense a lot more than people realize. And those misfires are obviously bad, but also just those additional yards that are left on the table, just killing offense. So that's the big issue for him. I am excited to see him working with Gus Malzahn, a QE guru, it seems, when it comes to kind of just getting efficient play out of their passers at the college level. I don't really love it for his NFL trajectory just because I think there's going to be not much work in terms of development, mechanics, stuff like that, and polish. So I'm not super bought in. I think the size is always going to be intriguing. The athleticism is nice. The tools are there. So maybe he's like a late round flyer, but overall, I'm really not in on him as taking that next step. And I think it's a guy that we've heard about as, this potential guy that could eventually make that step. But how long can you kind of sell yourself on, there's some stuff that's still left to be learned and added to his game that can really come along and make him take that next step that it's just been happening for too many years for me. And I saw it with a guy like Ward where, we needed to see that, but it just never came along. And then now it has. For Jefferson, it's been like 3 seasons now where we've been waiting on that next step and it hasn't happened. So I'm not buying in right now. I'm still excited for him as a college quarterback, and I'm excited to see him with Central Florida, especially with all the recruits they've been landing as of late. But as an NFL prospect, I'm not necessarily in. Moving forward, though, to Cincinnati, Brendan Sorsby, quarterback for Cincinnati, 6'3", 230 pounds, third-year sophomore, so definitely a chance that he is returning next year, and I think that's probably the direction he'll go. But I'm interested on your thoughts.
Yeah, I was interested. I thought, the legs are good. I think he really provides a threat on the ground. I wasn't really super excited about his arm. There were a couple throws where I thought he was not putting enough on it and it was punishing him, I think. And the accuracy, again, there were some nice throws, but not really blown away. I think there's a lot of work to go as a passer. But like you said, he's still young, so there's a lot of time for him to develop. I think maybe in a year or two is when we'll actually see him come out rather than this year. But I think I could see him being a good college quarterback over the next 2 years. I'm not super sure I'm there from an NFL lens. I don't think I'm quite there on the arm. But if he can take a step there, even a little bit, I think his legs provide enough intrigue to where, I could see him making his way into some conversations.
Yeah, and I think for me, I wrote down he was kind of middle of the road in a lot of traits. So it's not necessarily that I'm thinking that he's bad in anything too particular, but it was a lot of I wish there was a little bit more. I wish there was maybe a little bit additional speed, more zip on his passes, a little bit more touch whenever he's operating from the pocket. But overall, I mean, he's a solid young quarterback that I think is comfortably solid in each department to where you can kind of buy into what he can become and you
Yeah.
can feel comfortable with him leading your offense. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be a world beater this season, but I think that with some comfortable, dependable play from Sorsby, they can be sort of competitive, maybe make a bowl game. And I think that's a nice step in the right direction. I was kind of surprised to see Sorsby kind of pushed out of Indiana. I thought maybe he'd be an interesting guy to keep around with the Hoosiers, especially being so young and Cincinnati coming in. But it seemed like they wanted to build in the portal and kind of immediately kind of hit the ground running. So they went with Rourke. So Sorsby now is with the Bearcats. And I'm interested to see what happens. I do think that there's potential there. But yeah, right now I think there's nothing that really sells me on him to be fully bought in as a prospect, more so than just hoping that he can kind of manage and do effective as a game manager at the college level.
Yeah, I agree. I think him being young is good in that regard. I think he has a lot more faith in him developing something at a high level, when he's a redshirt sophomore versus a 6-year senior. So definitely intriguing. I'm not quite there for this year. I think we'll see him in the next couple seasons.
Yeah, now we're about to hit a really nice patch of QBs here. So we're going to start off Colorado, Shedeur Sanders, the probably most intriguing quarterback from this class. Just overall, he is an enigma when it comes to quarterback prospects, someone that is already kind of divisive amongst college football fans. Now entering the NFL draft discourse, what could go wrong? What were your thoughts on Shedeur?
Yeah, I liked him a lot more than I thought as far as, his on the field stuff goes. I think the athleticism is pretty good, better than I expected to be just from watching them, in passing throughout the season. I also liked his arm more than I thought I would. I think he can make a lot of throws at a pretty high level. And then obviously everyone knows the improvisation ability is well on display, anytime you turn on the Colorado tape. I think he does a little too much at times, so kind of like some of the other guys. He tries to do too much, as far as getting out and holding onto the ball too long. And I think that really hurts him at times. Obviously, Colorado did not have the best offensive line last year. It kind of plays a part in it. You kind of feel like you have to do more. Hopefully, some of the guys they bring in this year will be a little bit better, and he can kind of do a bit more in structure. I think that'll be good for him. But I think the arm's pretty good. It's not like an elite arm, but I think it's pretty good. I think he's accurate at all three levels. I think the decision making when he's able to kind of go through his reads is pretty good. I just think he kind of bails a little too quickly at times. And as a result, is forced into bad decisions. But I'm very intrigued. I think, along with Ward, Ewers, and Beck, he's in that top tier of quarterbacks for me right now. So I'm interested to see how they do this season. Because they've added a lot in the portal once again. So, there'll be some new pieces, but I think they could have a nice year if everything goes well. I think the off-field stuff, it's concerning, but as someone on the outside, you don't really know. You can't really make, in my opinion, you can't really make actual judgments on that because you don't have a perspective. But I think that could be something that hurts him as far as the draft goes. But, I can't know enough to be like, this is a problem or something.
Yeah, I liked his tape. I thought he has a really nice ability of just like showing excellent touch in terms of just overall accuracy and ability to make throws at all three levels. I think he probably is just the most consistent in that regard of all the
Yeah.
quarterbacks. And especially in an offense like Colorado's, where you knew that he was kind of uncomfortable in that pocket trying to sit there. He made some really nice throws and looked just like a pro at some of those departments, especially with accuracy and touch. The arm strength, I think, isn't necessarily as appealing as some of the other like top prospects, where like Cam Ward has kind of the untapped potential with his arm talent. Whereas I think Sanders is more middle of the road with his arm talent, more of like the Andy Dalton mold, I guess. Not necessarily a diss, like Dalton had a fine arm, but it wasn't necessarily in that elite tier where you're kind of wanting your QBs to be at. But still, Sanders can make the throws that you need him to. So there's not much of a question in that regard. The big issue right now, which a lot of people are going to want to see this season for, is Sanders' processing. And that's going to be something that he's already talked about a little bit with Sean Lewis, where he said the choice routes were a big issue in the offense, and it kind of resulted in a lot of miscommunications from play to play. And they hired a new offensive coordinator as a result. So I'm intrigued to see how he does, because when you're kind of vocal about that to the media, you kind of have to back it up after the fact, kind of similar to how we talked about Dart with Judkins. If Sanders is saying, the offense wasn't a good fit, now you kind of have to show when you probably had a little bit of say in a unique situation of hiring your new offensive coordinator. You have to show that you're comfortable in this offense and making a lot quicker reads, taking less sacks, and being more efficient at getting the ball out and making those throws. I like him. I wrote down pre-injury Teddy Bridgewater is probably where I'm at with a comp for him. I think the tools are pretty similar. Decent athleticism, but not necessarily like the scrambling type. More of a downfield passer with the ability to make those throws at all levels, but it's not necessarily the zipping passes 50 miles per hour around the field. It's more being smart with the football, being excellent in that short to intermediate range, and then being able to deliver when you need to downfield. I don't know. I think the off-field stuff is something that can easily kind of go away with a strong season and him, not necessarily having any more issues. But at the same time, if there's more Twitter beef with ex-teammates, or he's randomly calling out current teammates on social media, there's going to be weird vibes from him. And it's something that I think maybe reeks a little bit of having the privilege of having your dad as a head coach, which I think could easily rub people the wrong way. But at the same time, this is a league where Deion Sanders is probably one of the most connected people throughout the entire league. So someone like Antonio Pierce, who also played in the NFL, probably has known Shedeur Sanders for a decade now and probably has a good idea of his character. So it's going to be intriguing. And yeah, there's probably going to be some old head scouts that just absolutely can't stand the guy and think he's arrogant. But I think there's a lot of coaches that know Deion and probably know Shedeur and are willing to kind of make that investment if they think he's a good enough quarterback. And right now, I think he's shown enough.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out media-wise. I mean, we saw a lot with Kale last year, and that was way less, out there as far as things he said. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they do. I think there's gonna be a lot of pressure on them this year. They weren't great last year, but they had that hot start, and there was a lot of buzz, and then they kind of tapered off down the stretch. They make all these ads in the portal, so I think people are expecting a lot this year. So it'll be interesting to see if he can deliver.
Yeah, I'm excited for them. I do like Deion Sanders, and I think the way he's kind of gone about building the roster has been impressive. There's just, obvious steps that need to happen for Colorado for the hype to continue building. And if they fall flat and they're, 5-7 this year, I think there could be some steam that come out of the train. But moving on to Houston, Donovan Smith, this was an intriguing quarterback for me. 6'5", 235 pounds. Doesn't necessarily fit the mold that you'd expect from that framework, where you're probably thinking, oh, this guy's going to have an absolute cannon, be this great athlete. I think what I was more impressed about was his ability to process around the field. He was great at identifying windows and just making those throws very comfortably. He layered with great ability in terms of just putting it over that first wave of defenders to where he was getting the ball between the defenses and the levels of the field. I really like him as a passer. I think he's extremely intelligent, and I really like that aspect. The tools, I think you want to see a little bit more of an arm for the frame that he has, but I think it's solid enough. And I think my big question mark now is just how is he going to deal with pressure? Because there's a lot of moments where Houston looked a little outmatched, and he would fall back on his ankles and make some really bad throws as a result. So I want to see him be more comfortable, more confident, allow himself to kind of trust his athleticism a little bit more if he needs to, and be comfortable when pressured to make those throws. But I really like what I saw out of him. I wasn't necessarily as high going into the watch. I thought a lot of the media hype was maybe a little bit overblown, but I do think there's some intrigue here, and I think he's right now in my grading kind of like a day 2 option. But I'm intrigued by the mental game because I think he's very smart.
Yeah, I also was very intrigued. I think I'm a little higher in his tools than you are. I thought he can move around pretty well, and I thought the arm was pretty good. Maybe not top tier, but I thought he had a pretty strong arm. I think he can hit windows well. I would like him to lead his receivers a little bit better. I think he kind of throws behind his guys at times, but I agree that the processing there and he's making the right throws. I think the placement is needs a little bit more for me to get super excited about him. I agree. I think a day 2 type of range is very much in play. I think there's a lot to be excited about here. I think he's pretty far along as far as processing, like you mentioned. and that's usually where people need to catch up on. So I'm excited to see how he does this year. I think they lost Sam Brown, so it'll be a little trickier with the weapons around him, but I liked what I saw. I really did. I think the tools are there enough. I think, the mental side is there enough. I just need that placement to get a little bit better for me to be fully bought in on him.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens. And I think that's what makes it easier to kind of buy into this class as compared to like the 2020 year where everyone was waiting on that QB to kind of rise up, or 2021, sorry, where everyone was waiting on the quarterback to rise up. And Pickett had a great year, but there wasn't necessarily a bunch of safe options that were just definitely going to project up. It was more like, oh, maybe Malik Willis will, maybe Matt Corral will, maybe Desmond
Yeah.
Ritter will. And we kind of saw a lot of these guys kind of fell by the wayside, went in like third round. While Donovan Smith could easily be like a third round guy, I think it's pretty easy to see that next step for him. And it's a lot easier to buy into that happening. I think there's a lot of intriguing options around the league because of that. But moving forward here, Iowa State, Rocco Becht, third-year sophomore, so probably going to be a guy that kind of sticks around in college for a few more seasons. But 6'1", 205 pounds. When I was watching him, I was actually pretty impressed with his game. I thought he had some nice tools, nice athleticism. The big issue for me is he would bail on a clean pocket if he was playing against air. That's the big issue right now. Is he is just so frantic with his footwork that he is rushing, rolling out when he needs like no reason to. He needs to stick in the pocket, stay in structure a little bit more, trust himself a little bit more, trust his offensive line. And I think there'd be some big strides. But I thought he made some nice throws. I was really impressed with some of the moments. I was kind of expecting the typical kind of Iowa quarterback where you're seeing a lot of dink and dunk, kind of just like getting the ball out as needed, but not necessarily putting a lot on it. And he looked nice. I mean, he's 20 years old, so I think there's a lot of room to grow, and I do expect him to kind of stick around in college for a while. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is someone we're talking about as a draft prospect, especially with the I think there's a little bit of bias that happens in the NFL when it comes to the evaluation process, and riding off the momentum of Brock Purdy is definitely going to help him out a little bit.
Yeah, I was intrigued as well. I wasn't quite, I thought he struggled as a window passer, but I think what you mentioned with him being a little bit panicky kind of affects that, where he's not really super willing to sit in and deliver. So I think if he can get better there, I think the passing in tight windows will get better just naturally. I agree. I think, he's young and there's some work to do still. So I would be pretty surprised if he ends up declaring this year. I think it would take a huge year. But it's something I'll pay attention to in the next couple of years, I think. I thought the anticipation, there was some really nice flashes of that throughout his game. I think he throws with touch at a good enough level. I'm not sure I'm super in his arm. I think it's okay. I'm not sure I'm quite as high as you are, but I mean, he's so young right now. I think there's a lot of time for him to take a step or two and put himself into, these conversations in a year or two from now.
Yeah, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for just the situation that happened with Iowa State where Hunter Decker's suspended for the year, kind of flung back into this starting job, and we kind of saw him step up and do pretty well given the circumstances. I think Iowa State was coming off a pretty rough season, so being able to turn it around and then turn out a good season was very impressive in my mind. But yeah, I'm not necessarily all in on his tools. I didn't think it was like an incredible arm, but I just thought there
Yeah.
was some nice moments downfield with some pretty quick throwing motions that make it intriguing to where there's something there. But moving forward to Jalon Daniels, 6 foot, 220 pounds, a fourth-year senior, but I don't think he has any more eligibility left. Last season, played in just 3 games due to injuries. Had that issue, but I mean, I like him a lot. I think he's a tremendous athlete, moves around the field supernaturally. Downfield, I think, is where the big issue is. And it's not necessarily an arm talent issue. It's just the touchdown field where he is missing on throws, kind of sailing it a little bit high. He shoots a little bit with too much velocity on his throws, and I think it puts it over the receiver. But overall, I think the athleticism, the consistency, he threw for over 70% in each game that he played in 2023. And especially when you're considering the fact that this is someone that was kind of coming into games like randomly, like week 1, then week like 6, and then week like 11. So it was very, very impressive to me. And I really like him heading into 2024. Being 220 pounds, I'm not super concerned about the durability. I know that obviously he has to prove that he can stay healthy. If he's sidelined for all the year, then there's going to be issues. But right now, I think there is a lot to be intrigued about. He probably has one more year of eligibility, I guess, since last year he only played in 3 games that count as a red shirt. But this is someone that I'm really excited about, and I think he could legitimately be an NFL prospect if he can stay on the field.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little more concerned about the injuries than you. He got hurt both the last 2 years. He get to play 10 games in a season. at the college level. I think we really need to see a healthy season. That's the big thing over everything else. I agree that the tape when he is healthy is it's really good. You know, the arm's good. He's a nice athlete. He's a little small. I think he's only 6 foot, which again goes back to the durability thing. It makes you a little bit nervous. But I think if he's just a little bit more careful as a runner, I think he does too much at times and puts himself in situations where he's, taking on more contact than he really needs to. But, the arm's good. He's really accurate, like you mentioned. I'd like to see a little bit better anticipation of time. I think the timing is a little bit off on certain throws, certain concepts. But I mean, when he plays, it's good. He's exciting. I think teams are going to like him if he can put together a healthy season here. I think Kansas will be really good if he can put together a healthy season, especially with Devin Neal returning. They're going to have a good run game, and he can anchor the passing game. I think it's going to be an exciting team to watch if they can stay healthy, and I think he'll be someone in some serious conversations, if he can stay healthy as well.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Jayhawks. It wouldn't surprise me if they're a team that kind of comes up in the Big 12 discussion as a real contender. There's obviously teams like Utah, teams like Arizona that are expected to be the favorites, but Kansas is very much in the mix, especially with that backfield of Jalon Daniels and Devin Neal. But moving forward to Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman, the seventh-year senior, 6'3", quarterback that has been hanging around college football for a while, like we said, seventh year. But what were your thoughts on him, the 25-year-old gunslinger for the Cowboys?
Yeah, as far as NFL prospects go, I don't think I'm quite there with him. He's pretty old, going to be 25 on draft night. Wasn't really doing anything too crazy last year. I mean, Oklahoma State was the Ollie Gordon show, and I think it'll stay that way this year. He avoids pressure at a pretty high level, which I do like. I don't think he's really much of a runner though. He just kind of is an okay passer. The arm's like okay. I think he puts the ball in danger a lot and doesn't really provide big plays to the extent where it's worth it. I think Oklahoma State will be good. I think he can have a decent year. I just don't really think this is a guy that's going to end up getting drafted, just given the age and the lack of outstanding tools.
Yeah, I think he's slow with his processing, and it kind of kills him on the deep game. He doesn't have necessarily the natural arm strength to kind of deliver on passes to where he can stare down receivers, but he's very slow when it comes to kind of making those decisions. He telegraphs it to where the secondary can kind of adjust, the safety can roll over, and it results in some really bad tosses and some interceptions that just kill drives. And yeah, it's going to be an Ollie Gordon offense, and I think they liked what they saw last year in terms of just outperforming expectations to where they just wanted to roll it back with Bowman. But I would have liked to see maybe like a Tyler Van Dyke be the quarterback under center for this team, because I think it would have helped this offense kind of elevate his play. But I do think Bowman's a dependable veteran, which is something that is very underrated in the college football game. So in that aspect, I'm excited to see what he can offer to this Cowboys offense and what will be his last ride at college. But as an NFL prospect, yeah, I'm just not there. I don't think there's a defining trait that kind of puts him over the top.
Yeah.
So moving forward now to TCU, and I know you're a Josh Hoover fan, so I'm going to let you start this thing out.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of him before this, honestly, but I was really impressed. The Oklahoma game was definitely, a little bit more inconsistent, but the Baylor game was some really impressive stuff, I thought. I think the processing was, really there. I think he's willing to sit in the pocket and make the reads, read the full field and deliver. The arm, I don't think the arm is anything outrageous, but I think it's good enough. I think, the composure is really there for a guy who was making starts as a true sophomore. Following up what was obviously a big season for TCU. So, yeah, I was really impressed. I think the accuracy is still a little bit inconsistent. There were a lot of games where he was missing some throws that you shouldn't be missing, but like he put it all together in this Baylor game, and I was just super impressed. I don't think he's a guy that's going to declare unless he has an outrageous season, but he's someone I'm going to keep an eye on. I think that athleticism's there enough where he can get out of structure and make plays. I think he's a little bit hesitant too. He stays in the pocket too long, which I would like to see him improve upon, because he can escape and make throws on the run and take off with his legs, but he's just a little bit hesitant to break out of structure right now. But yeah, I thought the games were really impressive. So I watched Oklahoma and I watched Baylor, and the Oklahoma game was a lot more, young starter, missing some stuff here and there. But the Baylor game down, which was near the end of the season, I thought he had an excellent game. He completed over 80% of his passes and was just hitting everything, throws at all three levels. I was really moved by that game. So he's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on. Like I said, he's really young, so it would surprise me if he puts up a good enough year to declare. But I think in 2026 that there's a chance he could be a guy.
Yeah, I watched Hoover's first start with their game against BYU because I bet on BYU to pull off the upset and went terribly wrong. But overall, it was an interesting evaluation. 6'1", 196, so I think he's a little undersized in terms of the overall frame. But third-year sophomore now with 2 years of eligibility after this, so he's going to be an intriguing guy when it comes to just what the long-term projection is for him at the college game. I think the mechanics are kind of rough, which is going to either make or break him. I think that's something that if he cleans it up, there's probably a little bit more that can be found in his arm talent because I think right now with the way he throws, it's very kind of elasticy in terms of throwing motion. It varies on where his arm angle is, and I think the malleability is good, but you don't want it happening on every delivery. When you're in structure, when you're throwing comfortably, you need to have a consistent kind of arm slot, and I think that's something that's going to help him out. But I thought there was some nice zip. There's some nice tools on his arm overall. There's some bad turnovers. He had some rough interceptions. I think needs to be cleaned up. A lot of games with 2 or 1 interception in them. So that's something that'll need to be worked on. But he has some quick feet. He works well in the pocket. He's pretty confident, nice poise. I like that aspect, and I think there's potential for him to become more. I'm with you that he's probably going to stick around in college football. Probably not much of an NFL draft prospect right now, but I gave him a sixth, seventh grade, which is what I've been giving a lot of the guys. I'm like, yeah, they're probably going to stick around in college football. But if you told me in 2 years they're a more intriguing prospect with a lot more added to their game, it wouldn't surprise me. So that's where I'm at right now on them, and I'm excited to watch because the Horned Frogs, they definitely have some talent out there. Savion Williams is going to be an exciting receiver, so I'm excited to see what happens to this Horned Frogs offense, and I think Sonny Dykes is a really good coach to work with them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very intrigued. I think that's a good point with the release and the arm slot because I did feel like his arm talent was like a little bit inconsistent. I thought there were some throws where he could really zip it, and there was some where he definitely wasn't putting enough on it. So I think if he can work on the mechanics a bit, I think I'll be pretty much all in on him. But yeah, I'm excited to see how they do. I also like Dykes a lot, so I think hopefully they can bounce back again a bit this year because last year was obviously a little bit of a letdown considering the 2022 season they had.
So now moving forward to Texas Tech, and we got quarterback Behren Morton, 6'2", 220 pounds, fourth-year junior, entered into the starting job kind of mid-season last year for the Red Raiders, because Tyler Shuck got hurt. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on his play.
Yeah, I was intrigued. The frame's decent enough. He's not like 6'5" or anything, but he's solidly built. Can do a little bit with his legs. He's not like a runner, but he can make plays with his legs when he needs to. I thought he did a nice job of extending plays. Another guy tries to do a little too much times, I think, but he does a good job of keeping his eyes downfield, I felt like, and being able to make throws while evading pressure. Um, the arm was a little inconsistent, but I thought there were enough high level throws to where I could buy in. I think the consistency was not there. I think especially game to game, I think he had a lot of rough games and then a couple really nice games. I think there's another year. He has another year left. I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't use it. I think there are some things to iron out just on a consistency basis. But I think the tools are intriguing enough to where if someone's excited about him, I wouldn't be stunned. I know Dane Brewer was pretty high on him. I think he had him like quarterback 8 of his underclassmen. So there's some intrigue there. I think there's some buzz around him. I'm pretty sure for me, he's more of a 26 guy, but if you take a step, then I could see him. I could see him coming out this year.
Yeah, maybe it's the just trauma of Bailey Zappi, but I don't love Joey McGuire quarterbacks, and it takes a lot to impress me. And I felt like Morton was someone I've heard a lot of hype for around college football that I thought maybe was going to be an intriguing watch, and I really came away not that impressed. I thought the ball had way too much sputter on it for his delivery. I didn't see a lot downfield. I think he's in for a good year. I think McGuire is a very good college coach to where he's going to have some nice downfield passing efficiency. But overall, when it came to Morton, I thought he was pretty disappointing. I thought the mechanics were a big issue. A lot of polish that's still needed. It's a future prospect in my mind. I can't see him having a good enough year to where he declares unless it's just strictly based off of how productive he is on the stat sheet. But I think best for him is if he takes advantage of his eligibility in college and kind of sticks around and continues to just kind of grow and work out and efficiently add on to his frame, add on to his skill set. And I think that'll serve him best. But right now, I'm not there on Morton. I think there's still a long way left to go.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's a lot of flashes right now, which is great, but I think when you're projecting, to the NFL, you need to see a lot more than flashes, and I'm not quite there yet. But I think there's enough to to at least be interested. But I think it's more likely that, we'll be talking about it again next year on this show.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I do think McGuire's on the right track with Texas Tech. I think they're trending upward, but yeah, just it's different being a good college quarterback versus being a good NFL prospect, and sometimes that can really kind of impact how we're talking about them versus how they're perceived in the college football world. But moving forward to Utah, Cam Rising, another team that should be in for a great season. Probably, in my opinion, the favorite to win the Big 12. They're very exciting team, and Cam Rising is going to play a big part in that. 6'2", 220 pounds, six-year senior, but surprisingly has another year of eligibility left if he wants to return. He spoke to the media, said that this is probably it. Obviously, that could change based on how the season turns out for him, but age and injuries are going to be a big question mark when it comes to Rising. Still, overall, I think he's pretty dependable. He has some nice throws. He has some ability to score some nice passes at all levels of the field. He's a nice athlete. He has a good frame at 6'2", 220. The big question is durability. But if he puts together a pretty strong season, leading the Utes to the Big 12 championship and leading them to the playoffs, it wouldn't shock me if there's teams out there that are wanting to bring him in as a backup with the maturity and pro readiness I think he kind of offers. But overall, I mean, I think there is a little bit of a cap on what he can become as an NFL draft prospect.
Yeah, I'm not quite so high on him. I think, even back when he was having his two good years in 21 and 22, I think 21 was a little bit better than 22, and then he gets hurt and misses all of 23. It's tough to be super excited just with all that. He's pretty old. I think he's gonna be 26 right after the draft. So, I think it's gonna take a really big year for him to get drafted. I think the arm's okay. I think, obviously he can do a lot with his legs, which brings a lot of appeal. I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive as a passer, but at the same time, I think Utah's got a lot of nice pieces. I think there's definitely potential for a big year if he's able to bounce back from this injury. And I think if he does bounce back from his injury, it'll say a lot, about his character and his drive. And I think teams will like that. And I do agree that, his success in college will appeal to teams, and I could see him getting picked in that vein as like a backup type. But for me, I just wasn't quite there with him as a passer even before the injury. And, who knows what we'll see after. But I think, there's a lot around him, like I mentioned. And they brought in Dorian Singer, which I really like. I think they're buying low on him, and I think he's up for a big year. So I'm excited to see Utah this year. I think they're in for a shout for the Big 12, absolutely. And if Rising can have a good year, then I think he can put himself back in conversations. But I think it's going to take a really good year, just given all of the age and injury stuff around him.
Yeah, I love Dorian Singer, and I'm excited to see how he looks in that Utes offense as the featured weapon. But moving forward to our last quarterback of the day, and that's Garrett Greene, quarterback out of West Virginia, 5'11", 201 pounds. Obviously, a little bit of a frame concern. Fifth-year senior, so I believe this is it for him as a college quarterback. I think he's an intriguing and exciting quarterback prospect when it comes to just the ability to kind of make plays with his feet, extend passes, and really he kind of has some nice zip on his throws. I wasn't as bought in. I've seen some people hyping him up as, a potential high-end prospect after the season. Some of the guys thinking about him as a mid-round guy that just due to his improvisational skills. But overall, I thought there were some really nice moments. I think he's very confident, whether it's rolling out and keeping his eyes downfield or sticking in the pocket. I like that about him. I thought the arm was pretty solid. I didn't think it was like amazing, but I thought there were some really nice traits with it. But overall, I'm a little bit lower than some of the guys that are higher on him. I think I'm probably in the consensus opinion, if I had to guess, where I'm probably viewing him as a later day 3 type of option with a good season. But I do think he's done a great job for West Virginia and kind of saved Neil Brown's job a little bit, where he's now kind of added a new element to this offense. So I'm excited to see what the Mountaineers look like in 2024.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys we talked about over these 4 conferences, there's a lot of these like kind of undersized dual threat quarterbacks. And I think among them, like Garrett Greene's definitely on the high end. I think he's one of the best of those type of guys. I'm not sure I'm super bought in as far as NFL prospects go. I don't think I quite like him enough in structure. And I think he's too anxious to get out of structure at times, which I think, plays to his strength, but I think in the NFL that doesn't really fly so much. The arm isn't bad. There's some really nice throws on tape. I think it does sell him at times a little bit. I think it's not super consistent, and it might be a mechanical thing. I'm not really sure. I didn't catch anything, but I think the arm's okay, and I think he can do a lot with his legs. Obviously, I think he's great as a runner. I think he can buy himself time and make throws while on the run. But I think just the in structure ability isn't quite there for me to see NFL upside with him. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's like a priority free agent and, has a chance to fight for a backup job. I think, guys in his mold, are kind of like the fun backup who goes out and balls out at a close loss. So I could see him kind of fitting that mold and sticking around for a bit. But I think, mid round, I definitely can't really get behind that. I just don't think the tools are there with his arm, and I don't think the instructability is there, even ignoring that.
Yeah, well, that is all for the quarterback review. August 24th, everything goes up in flames as kickoff begins, and all of our opinions just go by the wayside. We're excited to get started here at 2 Minute Drill, and this is the very beginning. That's Jack Donovan. I'm Michael Rochman, and that's the 2 Minute Drill.